On this episode, we take it to the ring with Josh Rosen's Wrestle Club. So get ready to throw on the stretchy pants because you're listening to a kind of garbage, the Anthology podcast.
It's a kind of.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Anthology. Today, we're talking about Josh Rosen's Wrestle Club. I'm Adam Bishop, and with me, as always, is
Cody Andrews.
Cody. We finally are talking about our TCAF trip in this episode because that's where we got to meet Josh Rosen, even though that is not when I bought this book, because I bought this book at the Beguiling in Toronto.
Is this the book that when you bought it, there was like a footprint on the back of it?
That was the screen prints from this book, which I can't I looked for them and I don't know where they are. I'm sure they're like in either in a comic box or in like a portfolio with other original art, but it is by him.
Yeah.
Where, yeah, when I bought it, I was like, oh man, these ones. There's like a boot print on the back of it.
Yeah, he like stepped on them and went, oh shit, then picked them up and put them in an envelope.
Oh, amazing! I'm so happy. Yeah, we got to meet him at TCAF at the what did they call that section that we went to?
Oh, it was like the zine alley.
Yeah, where it wasn't in the main area. We had to we walked outside, we're like, where the fuck are we going? And we saw like somebody with their TCAF badge. We're like, hey, where's this place? I don't even remember what it was called. And they're like, oh, it's over there. And we had to like cross the street and we entered this building. And when we opened the doors, you just got like this hit of comic nerd musk.
Yeah, it was pretty weird. It was weird because there was a lot of trash over there, which I kind of feel bad for saying. There was a lot of like really independent stuff. And there was a lot of like interesting stuff too. I remember you picked this up, and I remember you also bought, I wish I knew her name. You bought another weird zine that had like, it was like a bunch of weird, like neat comic book characters.
I remember like I had it in my comic boxes. One was like a toilet on the
Yeah,
cover.
that was it. There was a bunch of neat stuff, but I remember there was a lot of like there was a lot of neat stuff that people were selling for like $5. And it was like, okay, this is interesting. And then there was a lot of like just pieces of computer paper folded over, and they're like, here's my comic book, it's $10. It was just trash. Do you remember I picked up a zine and flipped through it, and it was just like different artistic pictures of the artist's penis.
Hmm. And I tried not to. I did laugh. Like I tried not to laugh. And the guy's like,
Yeah.
"Hey, you interested?" And you're like, "I'm good." And I'm just in there thinking, of course, Cody's gonna pick up like the one zine that's just all penises. And the guy's like, "You like my work?"
Yeah, it was it was interesting to say the least. Yeah, so this is where you first saw Wrestle Club?
No, I
Oh,
grabbed it from the Beguiling, and
yeah.
I saw that I followed him on Instagram, and I saw that he was going to be at TCAF. I'm like, oh, I want to check him out. And I remember we were looking around when we were in the main. Wasn't it a library?
Yeah, TCAF was in the library.
Yeah, so we're going like all the levels. So like, fuck, we can't find it. And we're looking at the pictures of him at his booth, and we're like, where is it? Then we found out it was across the road, and that's where I bought all of the screen prints that had the boot prints on them.
I need to take a look. I Some of mine I can't find as well because I remember I bought a really interesting one, and it had like a really neat kind of like French comic vibe to it, and it was a screen print with it was interesting. It was kind of like almost looked like a Mobius kind of thing, and it was done on two separate sheets that you had to like mat together. And I remember, I think I remember taking his business card so I could look up some of his work later. And then when I got home, I lost the business card. So I
Oh,
just have I have like this really interesting screen print, and I have no fucking idea who made it.
one of my favorite things that I bought from there that you got similar item was there's this Read More Comics like underground
Yep.
comic, and I bought, I think it was like all 4 or 5 issues in the package for like $20 or $30. I got stickers with it, and you bought, I think it was just the newest issue. Then afterwards you go to me, oh man, I wish I bought what you bought.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I bought one issue that had like I flipped through it and it was pretty interesting. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna check this out. And you were like, I'm gonna double down and actually buy like the whole collection. And then I remember flipping through them later and I was like, this is really cool stuff.
I think the highlight for both of us was we both bought an art book.
We were both talking about going to TCAF. I think were we gonna go the year before and then we just didn't?
I don't recall.
I can't remember. We were talking about going, and then I read that James Stokoe was going to be there.
Yeah.
And I was like, that would be pretty cool. So we ended up going and both buying a copy of his Dark Horse art book called Grunt. And I made you stand, I wanted to buy a copy of it. And I made you stand in line with me for like an hour to get him to do a sketch in it, which he was nice enough to do. And I don't really collect like sketches or anything like that. So I wanted the book and I didn't really want to bother him. So he's like, would you like me to do a sketch inside? And I said, yeah. And he said, what would you like me to do a sketch of? And I was just like, whatever you want. Like, I don't know. I don't want to be inconvenient, I guess. So he kind of drew a quick orc stain character, which was really neat. And then you were behind me, so then you were like, we're here. I'll get a book too. So you bought a copy of his book as well. And then he said, would you like me to do a sketch in it? And I had explained to you that in Orc Stain, the orcs use dried penises as currency that they like cut off of animals or cut off their enemies. And the size of the penis basically denotes the value of like the currency. And you thought that was such a funny idea. And I had no idea that you even remembered that. And I think I had showed you too in the back of the Orc Stain trade paperback. He actually has a little diagram, like going more in depth over what like this penis currency is. Because what were they called? Granches?
Yeah, Granch.
So as soon as I step to the side and then he's like, would you like me to do a sketch in your book? You're like, I would like a Granch. And he just started laughing, being like, no one has ever asked me to draw a Granch on anything. So I'm watching Stokoe while we're in line. I'm kind of like watching him do quick sketches of One Eye from Orkstain or Godzilla characters from Half Century War and just kind of doing his own thing. And then you go, can I get a Granch? And then he takes like three times as long to give you like the most detailed sketch. You have the best copy of that book that exists, hands down.
Which we'll post it like on all of our social media accounts as well. Yeah, because it's just
Yeah.
like there's a dick in my book that he drew with a knife, just like slicing it into like coins.
Oh, it's so good. And then the other person I wanted to go see was, I think it was supposed to be Lonnie Nadler, who had did a book that year called Come Into Me through Black Mask. And I remember really getting a kick out of that book, but also having a hard time finding some of the issues. So I wanted to grab a bunch off them while we went there. But I think we missed him like three times. We kept going back to his booth and someone sold us the books, but like he wasn't there.
The other person
And
who was there is I'm not gonna get the name right. I can't remember what it was, but it was the dude who does sex criminals.
oh, Chip Zdarsky.
Yes, where like you'd think that he'd had no lineup. You're like, oh, Chip doesn't have a line, and you get there and they're like fucking between the bookshelves, and then you see this
Oh,
massive line.
yeah, he had a huge line. And then I actually kind of like how we went not for anyone big because Chip Zdarsky was pretty big and had a pretty big lineup. And I think Karen Gillian was there as well. But the other one was the year we went was the first year or was the first time that manga creator Junji Ito had ever even been to North America. And I remember like he's got a huge following. And I remember he was like he did a poster for TCAF. His name was all over every other poster for TCAF, being like the first time he's ever been to North America to a convention. And I think we walked past him once and it was just like an entire room zigzagged to buy a book off him or like get something signed by him. Like it was absolutely obscene how busy it was to if you wanted to see him.
Yeah, that room was that was the I think it doesn't matter. It was on the second floor, and you had to like I think they had like a counter. Like at one point we went to go in, they're like, hold on, you have to wait. We're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I mean, I think it's neat. I more went. I think we both went with the same intention of just kind of like looking at some underground stuff and looking at some independent stuff and just seeing what there is out there, which I kind of like. I thought even the fact that we stood in line for Stoko for so long, I kind of felt like I don't think I don't know. I don't think I really like standing in lines for stuff like this. And you know what I mean though?
Yeah.
Like I know there's things like Fan Expo where like I've never been, but like my understanding of it is basically you stand in line to like meet a celebrity and then buy something off them.
Yeah. One of my
With
favorite things too when we were there is we got to see the creator of The Pitiful Human Lizard, Jason Lowe or Lou. I'm not going to pronounce it right. It's Loo. Anyway, it's like super nice guy. We got to see his original art where we're like, oh, I want to buy it. It's $200.
that's the one thing I do regret is not buying Pitiful Human Lizard covers.
Yeah.
And the other one was Stoko had pages from Orkstain for sale. He had his portfolio with him, and I asked if I could flip through it, and he was like, "Yeah, go ahead." He's like, "There's prices on everything," and I don't know what I was thinking. I just looked through it and went, "Hey, this is really great stuff. Like, I look forward to getting more stuff off you someday." And he was like, "Yeah, thanks." And then we left, and then I remember like even at the end of the day, I'm like, why wouldn't I go back and buy one of his pages? Like that would have been really neat to own.
They're just so expensive.
But I don't know. I think his pages were like $300.
Yeah, I remember being at I think it was a fan expo, and there was I can't remember who the artist was. He had like the full size pages he did, and he had like X-Men pages when he did some X-Men books, and I'm like, I want Cable. And I think that was the one that we went to, and then you're like, there's a Cable, and it's me being like, it's $400.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have a Batman page from Tula Lote, and I remember bidding on it on eBay, and no one else. I got it for pennies. Like no one bid on it, and then I found through an art dealer one of the pages before or after in the same book, and I think they want 400 for the page. And that page doesn't have Batman on it, and the page I bought has Batman on it. And
Hmm.
I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I don't, like, if that's the value you're attaching to it, obviously people will pay that. And I never fully understood. I'm like, then why was this one on eBay not for a reserve? And why would someone approve my bid of like $70 or whatever I bid on it?
Because they're fools.
I guess. What other TCAF memories do we have? Remember we ate a hamburger that tasted like cat food?
Oh yeah, we had a Beyond Burger at some what was the place called? I don't even remember, but
I don't remember either.
I remember like I looked at it and like looks like cat food. And you're like, it doesn't look that bad, and then you bit into it like it tastes like cat food.
It was so bad. Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a TCAF this year, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I would love
But
to go to another one.
yeah, it was definitely, I was nervous going because I kind of thought once I did a bit more research on it and I saw like the list of all the names of people that were going, like as guests or vendors or whatever, I got really nervous because I was like, oh, is this going to be like what I dread Fan Expo is? Like, is this just going to be a series of lineups to like meet people I don't really care to meet? I just kind of want to like buy their books. Another funny one is we went to that like independent. I'm trying to remember. They had TCAF set up so like all these different branches were like had like a theme to them, and we went to one and it was like an independent alley. I walked past and someone had a stack of the current, or it wasn't current, it was a couple issues old, but it was one of the newest 2000 AD comics, and it was a cover that Tula Lote had done for it of Judge Anderson. And I didn't even think about it. I just picked up the book and I was like, oh, this is great. Like, this would be neat to own. And then the girl on the other side of the counter was like, "Would you like to buy that?" And I said, "Yeah, how much?" And she's like, "It's $10." And I went, "Yeah, that's great. Here's $10." And then there was like an awkward pause. And then she goes, "I could sign it for you if you'd like." And I was like way too embarrassed to be like, "No." So I just said, "Yeah." So then she scribbled her name on the cover of it. And I ended up looking it up later, and she had done art on one of the other stories inside. But I just was like too awkward to be like, "You don't have to do that."
All you have to remember is for that one awkward moment that you had, there was at least 50 people before and after you that had even worse ones.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because we saw some characters, I don't remember anything about them, but like there were people there that were, the comic convention type, I guess is the fair way to say it.
There is a, I don't think, like, I've never really been to a convention or anything like that, but I kind of have in the back of my mind, like, I could picture things that are probably like stereotypes for the people that go there. And I kind of never even thought about it. But when we went and bought some of the books, and then the creators were like, "Do you want me to sign it or do a sketch in it?" I think it was Stoko. Someone was in front of us and bought the book, and then Stoko was like, "Would you like me to do a sketch inside of it?" And then he pulled out his own like sketchbook, and he's like, "Actually, could you do a sketch inside of this?" And all I could like, I kind of watched it happen, and other artists had, so he had a book of like all of his favorite artists' sketches that he had collected, but you could tell that like some of them, a lot of time and like effort had been put into it. So if you're the next person sketching in it, obviously you're going to have to like kind of make a similar effort. Otherwise, it's going to like look bad. So I just remember Stoko had to draw like this huge picture in it. I guess. And I'm like, I never thought of it, but I'm like, I guess that's a thing that happens at these conventions is you offer up a sketch or you offer up whatever. And then someone's like, "Could you do a sketch on all these books?" And it's like, holy shit.
One of the moments that I'm just remembering now, and I feel bad for even making fun of the person because it was a female artist, and she had like, I hate the art style, and I hate the way the character looks when she draws it. But it was I remember going to you, it's like, ew, like look at that art, it's horrible, and you're like, yeah, she draws Squirrel Girl.
Oh shit. Is it Rebecca Henderson?
I don't know, but
The,
it's
I
yeah.
yeah, she was there. You're right. She was there selling stuff.
Oh wait, is it Erica Henderson?
Erica Henderson, thank you. Yeah, Erica Henderson was there, and she definitely has like her own art style. I kind of remember she ended up winning an Eisner for like best art. I'm pretty sure on Squirrel Girl, and I remember it kind of being controversial at the time because a lot of people were just like shitting on her art, which I don't think is bad. It's just like its own thing. But yeah, I remember we walked by her, and you're just like, "I'm not a big fan of that," and I'm just like, that's kind of her gimmick is like a lot of people hate her art. A lot of people like a lot of people in the industry and stuff think her art's like like they can't get enough of it. They think that like she's fantastic.
I'm looking
And
at
then
something right now, and I can tell you the coloring is nice, but she probably doesn't do her own colors.
I don't think she colors it. But yeah, like it's like a very cartoony, it's just kind of like a slightly exaggerated cartoony art style, which when I first saw it, I wasn't thrilled by it. But then the more I saw it, I kind of dig it.
It's the faces. That's all it is. Like everything is fine except for the faces. The faces are
Yeah.
so ugh. I can't. All right, so let's get to Wrestle Club.
Yeah.
So this is a wrestling zine. I love the way that Josh Rosen laid out the book because it starts out with like an introduction of what's about the wrestling league, and then you flip to the next page, which is a bio on your main character Nebula, and then you get like another bio for another character, a couple more bios, and then you get thrown right into the middle of the story.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I'm not a huge wrestling fan, but one of the things I do enjoy about wrestling that you kind of opened my eyes to was like just a lot of the backstage stuff and a lot of the like planning that goes into it. What's it called? The kayfabe or whatever?
Oh yeah, kayfabe would be like their storylines that they pretend are real or that they
Yeah.
perform.
Yeah. So like you kind of explained some of that stuff to me, and I'm like, that's actually the behind the scenes stuff that goes into making all this is actually really interesting. I remember you buying this zine, and then when you said you were gonna make it one of your picks, I was excited to read it just because I kind of was thinking about it. I'm like, there's a lot of material to really delve into. Like that's a really neat concept to like base your book around, like the behind the scenes of wrestling. So I was really excited to read this.
Yeah, I don't know if he's done a second like issue. I hope he does because yeah, as you read it, it's basically the first like part of the story is one wrestler trash talking another one in an interview, and then the other wrestler being like having to respond, her being like, I'm gonna wrestle you," and it's like this very awkward like interaction between the two. And that second wrestler, you don't know who she is because you haven't got to her bio. But when you flip it to the next page, you get her bio and you get to like read about her, about who that person is, where the character that was trash talking her beforehand, like you already know what her story is because you got to read her bio in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few more wrestlers, but like I said, the main wrestler Nebula, you get to see that she's just starting out. She hasn't really, I don't think she's had a match yet, or she might have just had a couple. But she's talking about how she wants to be like a bad guy, or she could do a really good job with it. And then she like tries to go grr, and then everyone laughs at them. And one of the big stars like interacts with them in a way, and they're all like starstruck, like, oh, this wrestler who is like, oh, I want to say a senior, but like, and she's not even an older wrestler. She's a couple years old, but she's like a legend to them somehow, and they're starstruck that this other wrestler even just talked to them in passing.
Yeah, I like that too. It just kind of, I'm trying to remember. I think the conversation was something about how she didn't think she'd make. She's like, I don't think I'd make a very good heel, which is like that's like wrestler lingo for villain. And then the popular wrestler walks by and says, to be a good heel, you like a good face has to sell you being evil or you being bad. And face is like the opposite of a heel. Like a face would be like the hero wrestler, which that's something like that. Like that's what I was talking about. Like that's something I really liked about this book was it delves into like the behind the scenes of wrestling, which I think has a lot of like it's a really, really interesting culture. So I thought that was neat, like it getting into the whole lingo and breaking down the whole like dynamics of a story where like you need a heel, but the heel needs a face. Like you need a face character, but you also need a heel to create conflict with. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, for like I've read lots of wrestling comic books and they're not good. WCW had their own back in I want to say their early 90s. Part of that
Hmm.
like that licensed comic book expansion, and then WWF/E, like they still do comics today, and they're all awful because they play it straight. Like this is the story, this is real, this is like the wrestling world these characters live in, and they've never been enjoyable. Where this one, you get to see like it's the behind the scenes and the them figuring out their characters so far. And yeah, like I think there's only 4 pages of actual like in storytelling, but then the rest
Hmm.
of it is learning the characters. And like I really hope he continues with this.
Yeah, we'll have to look it up to see if he's done anything more with it or get in touch with them. But I think that's kind of the fun thing to do with I guess it's for any book really, but it's pretty fun because you kind of have the double layer of it with wrestling is not only do you get to create characters for your book, but you get to create those characters' wrestling personas as well. So it's kind of like you get to make like almost double the characters.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is when you start like a character for this, it's you don't have the full character straight away. Instead, what happens is you introduce your character, you have your base ideas, and then as time goes on, like that character's development gets fleshed out more. So you're adding more story to them, you're adding details, and that's one thing that he can really expand on. If I had one complaint about the book, when stuff is like it's hand drawn, it's black and white, except for the pages. He uses different color pages. I wish that the text, instead of being a printed font, a lot of old like underground comic creators would print up the text they would put it under the paper and then they would trace on top or ink on top of it to get a
Yeah.
handwritten style. This is just whatever font it is, like times. But like that's the only thing I wish he did was hand write it over top, like make it his own writing. So that'd be my only complaint. Other than that, like I love this book. The art is great, the story's there, and even at the back, he talks about why he loves professional wrestling.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is this zine isn't lettered. Like it's not lettered with pens and inks. It's actually like typed out with a computer, which that's something that it took me a while to kind of notice how big lettering is in a book. It's because to me, I always kind of figured lettering was one of those things where you don't notice when lettering is good. Like when lettering is done well, it's just very fluid with the book and it just fits in and it seems like that's what the font and that's the energy that matches the scene and this all looks right and it fits and it doesn't jump out. It just kind of matches up with the energy of the visuals that you're looking at. But when you see lettering done wrong, it stands out so much and you're just like, this looks stupid. Like, why is the lettering done so small here? Why is it done so big? Why is it overpronounced here and like trying to like pop off the page or whatever? So yeah, like I definitely agree. It would have been nice to see this actually be lettered as opposed to just like computer type. But I guess you also have to look at it that he's just trying to like make a zine. And obviously with that, there's a lot of, there's quite a bit of text in this zine, like, cause he does like all the bios for all the wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure there's got to be like some sort of timetable thing as well where he's like, I can't sit down and ink and letter all this. Like I kind of need to do this a bit quicker.
Yeah, I can totally understand that.
I really like the art style's very neat. It's like very cartoony, which I thought definitely kind of suited the atmosphere that he was building with it. I thought it was really neat too to see like what you were saying about the other wrestling books that you've read. I thought it was neat to see a wrestling book done where it didn't focus very strongly on like the actual physical conflict of wrestling. It seemed more that it was kind of like showing the community. It was a book that was more focusing on the community of wrestling, which I thought was neat. And I've seen some wrestling books as well where like they're played straight, where either it's a book about wrestling matches that's played straight, or it's a book about characters, like licensed characters in the wrestling leagues. And it like is just these made up stories of like them saving the world. So I thought it was neat to see a comic book that actually kind of takes a peek behind the curtain and focuses instead of being like, oh, this character, when he's not busy wrestling, he also like saves the world from terrorists. It's like, no, in this book, we're going to focus on the actual like behind the scenes community and interaction between the wrestlers and how they click together. I think the only other wrestling book I've ever read that I liked was by a Canadian guy named James Edward Clark. He did a book called Evil, which was about like a wrestling tournament. I can't. You know what? Maybe that'll be my next pick for a comic because it was about wrestling. Like halfway through it, you find out that there's like a huge supernatural element to it. It was really weird it was really weird, but in a really good way. I'm definitely going to get you to read that one soon.
So before we do our rankings, I do want to point everyone to Josh's websites. There is joshdraws.com where you can check out a bunch of his artwork. And then I believe if you want to buy stuff, if you go to jrosen.storenvy.com, you can actually buy the products. I don't know if it's a digital or if they get shipped to you, but this one is available on that website for $7. Okay, so for rankings, I know this isn't like a full-fledged comic, it's a zine, but I'm still gonna put this in my top 10. I'm gonna put this. This one's gonna go under X Woman, which is number 6. So this is gonna be my new number 7. It's one above The Death of Haggard West. So my new number 7.
My ranking for this book, this is going to be my new number 9.
Man, you're knocking down Crystal Breeze after just bringing her up.
I still really like that Crystal Breeze book. Mo-
Oh, it's
I,
ridiculous.
I like that book a lot more than I should have.
That's like me in anything that we watch or read about.
Yeah.
So you've decided for our next anthology episode, we're going to do Evil.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna get you to read that.
Awesome. Evil will be our next anthology episode. Next week's episode, I believe, is First in Cameo with myself and Dan Collins. And we are talking about Spider Woman, Jessica Drew. So if you like CGC comics and you want to hear us talk about their notes and the issues, their prices, their grades, definitely check that out. All right. Thanks for listening. And be sure to check out akindofgarbage.com for everything that we've done, episodes, top 10 lists. You can find our Twitter and Instagram links there, both at A Kind of Garbage. You can go to our Facebook page, A Kind of Garbage Pod. Don't forget to check out the Patreon at patreon.com/A Kind of Garbage, where you get a bonus episode every other week where Cody and I watch a movie. And then we either Cody either gets mad at me for picking something horrible, or I get a kick out of something good that Cody picks. And don't forget to email us at akindofgarbage@gmail.com. And finally, you can find myself on Twitter at Presto Adam, and with Dan Martin, Chris, and Chris on Hey Kids Comics radio show Friday nights at 8 p.m. on Trent Radio 92.7 CFFF FM. And I believe it's on heykids.ca or heykidscomics.ca as well. Cody, where can the listeners find you?
Just on Twitter at a synced word at Twitter.
He's a hard man to find. All right. Thanks for listening. I am Adam Bishop.
And I'm Cody Andrews.
So, Cody, Danielle, my girlfriend, and I just finished watching a TV show from 2003. It ran for 8 episodes, and it was a Spike TV original.
Was it the Joe Schmo show?
You're goddamn right, it was the Joe Schmo show.
I absolutely love that show as well.
Yeah, it's I was sitting there thinking about it. I'm like, fuck, I wonder if that's online. So I found it, legally downloaded it.
Yeah.
The first season and the second season. We finished the first one, and I'm excited to watch the second one. Did you know there was a third season?
No, I remember watching the second one.
Yeah, the third season was done a decade after the second season.
That makes sense because you kind of need a bit of time to. The whole gimmick for the show was the fact that they staged a reality show. Only one contestant in the reality show was a contestant, and everyone else it was kind of like a Big Brother housemates show. So one of the contestants was a real contestant, and then all the other ones were actors hired by the show just to like basically make that guy's life a living hell.
And the first season, yeah, was like Big Brother. The second season was The Bachelor, and the third season was a cowboy bounty hunter show.
Huh.
I can't find the third season online, which is really sad.
The whole gimmick to the first season was the fact that they basically stumbled upon the most likable person in the world as their contestant, and whatever they threw at him, he just kind of was like tried to see the bright side and everything, and he just ended up being like this really nice Midwestern guy who
Oh
never
yeah.
really like because it's like a Big Brother show, so obviously they're trying to like pit people against each other and make conflict, and then they ended up finding like the one guy in the world who was just like, well, I don't want to pick fights with anyone, and I don't want to like cause any drama or conflict.
My favorite is I think it was on the first episode, and they played it a couple times later on, is where they're asking him about the women on the show, and like he likes them all. He's like, yeah, this one girl, like she has a smoking bod. And then another girl, he's just like, yeah, she's pretty hot too, and like she's black, and I don't mind mixing races. And I'm like, oh my
Ah,
god.
I don't remember that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, he
Um,
he meets the gay character who's in real life not really gay, and then he's just like, "Hey, buddy, you're gay, right?" And there's like, "What?" He's just like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to be rude." It's like, "But you're gay, right?" And it's like it's all kinds of awkward, and it's just amazing watching his faces and seeing like how. I don't want to say he wasn't inappropriate. He was just oblivious, and some of the stuff that was said, just it's a product of its time.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm like Spike TV was like marketed as like the bro channel. So I'm definitely sure if you go back and watch it now, there's a lot where you're like, how is this real? Yeah, I remember, but was it the first season where he recognized somebody as an actor?
I think it was the second.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, in the second season when they're meeting, but who was the actor? It's someone who's like famous now.
Well, the funny thing is, the first season, one of the doctor of the show, or like she plays a doctor, but she's a contestant. It's Kristen Wiig,
Yeah.
but she wasn't
And
famous back then.
yeah. And then in the second season, I can't remember. It's somebody like it might even be like a Canadian comedian who had been in like some American television things just as like kind of like a B-list like a just like a supporting character. I'll have to look up the name. But I remember like as soon as I saw him, I recognized him immediately being like, "Oh, that's so and so, the like that Canadian actor and comedian." But like no one in the States would know who they were. And then everyone's introducing themselves to each other on the first day. And then I can't remember if it's the guy or the girl, but they're just like, "Hey, you're an actor, right?" And he was just like, "Uh-oh." But like they didn't piece it together. They were just like, "Oh, you're like, that's just who you are. Like you're an actor, but you've also like signed up to be on this reality show."
Yeah,
And
that's
then,
I think we're gonna watch that next. I'm super excited because I
oh,
only remember the beginning of that one. I don't remember the rest of it.
the second season.
Yeah.
The second season wasn't as good as the first season,
Oh no.
but the only gimmick was one of the contestants figures out the show is rigged. Like I think it's about halfway through. They're just like, wait a minute, this is all rigged. And then instead of kicking them off the show, the producers just pulled them aside and they're like, you're 100% right. This is all like a hidden camera prank that we're playing on you and the other contestant. Do you want to be part of it now? And the contestant says yes. And they
Hmm.
just switch sides. And I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, they had the entire I believe they had the entire first season recorded, and right before they announced the first season, they started recording on the second season. So the people who were in the second season had no idea about the first season. I know Danielle and I just also watched I guess rewatched the I was gonna say the Last Starfighter. No, it was a Flight of the Navigator,
Oh yeah.
where at the end, like I'm like, oh, Pee Wee plays the spaceship, like the alien side of it, the robot, and at the end it says Paul, but it says some other last name, and I'm like, fuck, I could have sworn that was Pee Wee. And then on the Plex server, we go down and see the cast, and I'm like, no, it is Paul Rubin. But I think that that movie must have been made like while he was, or it must have been finished being made while he was in the movie theater. So they just kind of like switched his name.
Oh my God. That's hilarious.
That was a Disney movie, and I'm waiting for the remake. And it has a very, well, I don't even want to say very young, but it has a younger Sarah Jessica Parker. An awkward moment where she like hits on a 12-year-old, and I'm just like, ugh.
Well, that's kind of people have been posting that stuff on Twitter, and it's kind of funny because I don't really remember. Like, I remember watching movies when I was a kid, but you kind of like, after so long, like your memory of it just kind of gets skewed. And you're like, when you rewatch it, you're like, was this the movie I saw when I was a kid? Because it just seems so foreign. Like the one that we found out recently was when we sat down and tried to watch one of the Ernest movies.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I thought these were real movies. This isn't a real movie. Like this feels like a shot on video like project. But yeah, like it's definitely weird like rewatching a lot of those movies. But a movie I remember was do you remember Blank Check?
Oh yeah, the kid who, what was it, like a bad guy runs over his bike, and then he's like, "Oh, write you a check for the bike," and he just never puts the amount of money on the check.
Yeah, so they rob a banker, they steal a bunch of money, and then during the getaway they run over a kid's bike, and he gives him a check, and he's like, "There, go buy a new bike." But like the money they stole, they deposited into the account that he gave him a check from. So the kid ends up what he writes like $1 million or something stupid on the check, right?
He uses a typewriter and like types it out, and then when he goes
Yeah.
to cash
Which by the way, all of this is fraud. this
yeah,
this is not how checks work.
when he goes to cash it, he takes it to the bank teller, the lady who's also in on the scam. So I think she's just like, oh, this makes sense. They would send a kid to get the money because no one would expect that.
Oh, is that how okay.
Yeah, and they just
So
load up this fucking kid's backpack with like wads of cash.
yeah, that makes sense, I guess, now. But anyways, this I don't remember that. And the fact that I don't remember that, also the movie ends because like the protagonist is like a 12-year-old boy, and then I don't even know if she works for the bank or what the hell she does, but there's like a grown woman, and then she ends up being the romantic interest for the boy. And the movie ends with them like he loses all the money, and then she's like, "You're gonna have to go back to being a kid who like delivers paper for quarters." And then he's like, "But I liked being rich because like it made me, I don't know, feel like an adult or whatever." And she's like, "You'll be an adult soon enough." And then he's like, "Will you date me when I'm an adult?" Or he says something about going on a date with me, and they start haggling over what age he has to be for this like 30-year-old woman to have sex with them. And like as they're haggling, like the age gets lower and lower, and you're like, he's a fucking child. And then it just they finally like whatever age they finally agree on, which is like it's still a young age. She's like, all right, till then. And then they kiss, and it's a 30-year-old woman kissing like an 11-year-old boy. What the fuck am I watching?